Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we've got this, which is a 3-gallon oilless compressor from Harbor Freight. This is not mine. This was is actually from a friend of mine that I work with. He's had this for about 5 years, and apparently this won't air up beyond about 30 psi. He's been having some trouble with it. Told him I'll take a look at it, and we're making this video here so we're going to try to diagnose what's going on with this compressor. It's 5 years and won't go above about 30 psi on the gauge is all I know, is all I've been told. The gentleman I work with, wonderful guy, probably not the greatest with tools, so this could be something really simple, or this could be something really complex. So he gave me the compressor, it's got the cord, he also gave me his air hose, which is just this basic coil, and his basic blowgun. He uses this to clean out his lawnmower and air up car tires. That's all he does with it. He's not really a tool head or someone that does tools all the time like you and I might do. So let's take a look and see what we've got to work with. The first thing I want to do to verify, and I just need to kind of check all my bases down, is this air hose leaking at all? And so I've got my compressor air line here. This is hooked up to a 30-gallon compressor, and we're going to plug this in here and see if we have any issues. Okay, the first thing I'm hearing is an air leak out the other end. And so there is an issue right along here on this side. If I take it out, sounds like the leak is gone. So let's put the microphone right by where I'm hearing the air coming from so you can listen to it too, right by my left hand. To be fair, this is pretty consistent. I've actually had really poor luck with pneumatic valves or couplings from Harbor Freight. So there's one issue we've already identified that could be causing my friend an issue with this compressor. The next issue, to do that, we're going to have to actually plug this into the wall and check it out and see what we get. All right, so I got the compressor plugged into the wall. The next thing we're going to check is our drain valve. This is a Harbor Freight tool, so I'm going to put the safety glasses on. And now I'm going to turn on the switch. I actually have to say this is interesting. I've never seen this compressor before. It actually has a little spot for an air chuck up there. Are there little air tools up there? Kind of a nifty little bit there for a little do-it-yourself one-trick pony compressor. So let's turn it on and see what we get. All right, so I've had the compressor running for a little bit here, and I can hear, if I put my finger over the end of this, it's gonna, there's air leaking out of this valve. Hopefully you could hear that. So I think we've got a bad fitting there. I'm going to replace that fitting next. All right, so the part I'm going to use looks like this. This has a male end on it. I have used this before I switched over to high flow fittings. This will be fine for my friend. Nothing special about this. I think this is probably either from Menards or from Lowe's. I don't remember, but I never buy Harbor Freight fittings, so I know it's at least better quality than that. Wish I could tell you more about that. And now we're going to replace this leaky fitting here. Do that, we use a pair of these Nipex pliers wrench to be able to do that. All right, so now we got the air fitting replaced. Let's power this thing back on and see if they start sounding a little bit better. So after a couple minutes of running, I've got this to about 40 psi. I can't seem to get it to jump much higher than that. So I'm going to start by removing these screws here using a #1 Phillips. Oh, you need about 3-4 inches just to be able to get down into the recess to be able to remove the screws. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 2 in the front, 2 on either side of the handle, then 2 in the back. So there's going to be 6 screws to remove. So you're going to remove those 6 screws and see what we see underneath. So now with those 6 screws loosened, the first ones I was able to do was to pull out the handle. So it comes off just like that. And now if we take off this top cowling, what we're going to see here is that the power switch is indeed wired in back there. You can see there is an impeller here that is, and you got the compressor line there. We're going to check the fitment on those fittings, and there is a bolt back there at the bottom, just behind the regulator. We're actually going to flip this on here and see if I feel anything around there that can indicate a leakage, and making sure that I don't get my finger caught into that fan that's going to keep everything nice and cool. Just to make sure I get my bases covered, I'm going to take the regulator nut here off the front using these same Nipex pliers. And now as we can see this coming out, what do we have here? We've got our plunger here was stuck pretty well into our regulator. However, this is intact, which is a good sign. We'll put that aside and we'll look at the rest of it here. This is where the air is controlled, and this plunger here, you can see it's lubricated, but it was definitely sticking behind the spring here that's in it. There's the O-rings. We got to get this seated in here just right, because this is supposed to move within. If I take the spring out like that, this goes in like that, and then as we adjust the knob, this pushes this in or out to adjust the flow. The little dimple here in the front is going to go in and out of here to control how much air gets by. And so it seems that this is actually pretty well intact. I've got to say I'm pretty impressed that I feel like the lubrication here, at first I thought this was stuck, but I think it's actually moving pretty well. The lubrication is still there, so I'm actually happy with that. So we'll put this back together and consider that part of this build okay. The O-ring is still fine. Okay, so the compressor on the ground, I'm not getting much above about 30 psi on the tank pressure. So I've got basically a male coupling here. Let's see if I can hold this for the camera just right. We use it to connect my other compressor direct here and see if we can get the dial to move. So that once I put this on, it's going to create pressure both ways. So we're going to try to go as quickly as we can like this. And now from the back feeding, you can see I got the pressure here up to about 70. Had to do a couple quick moves to get my other hose disconnected. So hopefully that will have moved some parts here by having this all the way open. Will help to seal off the regulator and to get this pressure up. So now I'm going to reactivate it, see if I can get this up to the advertised pressure about 100. Hopefully I moved some parts there to lubricate it around and get it moving by back feeding the air, and let's see if that did any good. Now that we've seen that the tank can hold pressure successfully, the pump just can't build pressure. This is going to turn my attention now towards the pump itself. The regulator appears to be good, so now our issue is going to be back here. So we're going to start looking at the cylinder head. Suspicion now turns to perhaps the reed valve under here, so we're going to have to disconnect our air fill line using a flare nut wrench, and loosen the screws on the cylinder head here. So Phillips head screwdriver to the rescue. And then now to remove this, we're going to have to actually disconnect the flare nut fittings here. We're going to be using a 12mm flare nut wrench and a 12mm wrench. Now with that loosened, I should just be able to pull this off like that. And then we can inspect our head assembly here and see what we got. And so it's interesting, you can see there's a bit of debris. That looks like it could be from possibly a damaged reed valve in there. Let's look at the cylinder head itself. You look at the cylinder head, we can see we've got a bunch of debris here, so it's actually there, so maybe we can clean this up and it'll be fine. So I'm going to get out some degreaser and we're going to try to clean that. We also have a gasket here. Let's check the gasket. That's got some wear on it. That might still be salvageable. So maybe there's a better look here of what you can see, where there is a piece of debris right here blocking this valve in the head that I need to be able to get out. It looks like maybe some gasket material. So I'm going to see if I can use a couple of flat-headed screwdrivers to be able to pull that out. There we go. And so it looks like we had a little bit of this gasket that had ruptured and ended up actually causing this valve up here on top to leak. Because if we look at this and we press on it, you can see this is supposed to open and release in dealing with our air intake and our release. So I suspect that had something seriously to do with our inability for this to be able to develop pressure. So now part of the next challenge is going to be putting this back together. We're going to clean up the pump here a little bit and get her back going again. On the cylinder head here, I'm going to use just a little dab of this AMSOIL degreaser sprayed onto a shop towel. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses, obviously. When doing that, we're just going to see if we can shine this little head back up here a little bit nicer. Remove some debris. Then we'll check the reed valve on here, just to make sure this can come up. There we go, got it with the fingernail. And so now that we got that up there, and I know this is supposed to be oilless, but I'm just, after putting that bit of degreaser on there, I'm going to put just a light drop of this 3-in-1 oil on there, just to make sure, since this is a moving part, just one drop should be hopefully enough to have this lubricated. Because there is this wear ring, this piston ring around here that, while it's not apparently supposed to be lubricated like you would on an oil lube pump, that's obviously going to be one source of wear. So I'm just going to have a small drop of 3-in-1 oil around that, just to help to keep that lubricated. Obviously other pumps would actually have a whole oil reservoir, this one does not. And so I think that should be good on the lubrication. And now it's going to be time for some reassembly. And now to reassemble, we've got this damaged ring here that I removed earlier. I'm going to get rid of some of this debris here that's pulling apart. Ideally, if there was a rebuild kit for this compressor, I would try to get an actual rebuild part for that, but I don't believe there is. So we're just going to have to go with it. And this ring here is supposed to sit, if I take this around the edge of the head, and then put this into the little recess. That goes around. I want it to be somewhat delicate with this gasket here. And now with that in, I'm going to put my cylinder head back on like that. And make sure that I've got my flare nut here in the right spot, being careful with that. I'm going to start that by hand. Put in my 4 cylinder head bolts or screws. Now I don't actually know a specific torque that this is supposed to be set to. You know, usually we're thinking about torque specs and torque wrenches when it comes to head bolts, or torque to yield fasteners, but we're talking about a Harbor Freight compressor here, so I'm not terribly concerned about needing to get that fancy. I'm going to work these bolts in, kind of working around the head. I'll come back and snug them up here in a moment. We're just getting them nice and tight, or just at least soft and tight, and we'll get these down to what would feel like an appropriate tightness. All right, that feels about like it was when it came off. Now we're going to use a regular 12mm open end wrench on the bottom, 12mm flare nut wrench on top, and snug up that air fitting there. There we go. That feels about right. And now that we've got their head taken off, cleaned up, I'm going to set the cowling just back on top loosely before reassembling it, and we're going to give this a test to make sure it actually works before I actually try to screw this back together. And now let's power this on and see if it works. And there you go, the pressure cutoff switch is cut off. We're at slightly over 100 PSI. I think this looks like it's working. I don't know how long this fix is going to work, but it looks like I can bolt this back together and return this to my friend and tell him the good news that his compressor's working again and he's back in business. Just a quick recap of the various tools that we used today. With air compressors, always want to have your safety glasses. I used a pair of my Knipex pliers wrench. These are good for the air fittings because they always have parallel jaws. And then I've got a pair of small, flat, or standard screwdrivers I can put together and use kind of like tweezers to be able to test the reed valves. I've got a 12mm flare nut wrench, a 12mm open end wrench, a Phillips head screwdriver, number 1 or number 2 will work. Use a little bit of 3-in-1 oil and a little bit of engine degreaser just to clean everything up. And so those were just the basic tools that we used, and that's it. So this repair was pretty simple once we dug into it and just kind of kept going for it. You obviously saw me use another compressor to test the pressure holding capability of the tank on the regulator. That's not here. That ended up being a pass. Well, I don't know if that's a tool or not, but obviously that was part of the diagnostic process that you saw today. And so that's it. If you found this video useful and interesting, click that thumbs up button, and I'll see you back here on another video. Have a great day.